Hey there, welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. I'm Brooke.
I'm Demi.
Merry holidays. I'm Nielle, and Romeo is out today.
And on today's report, calls grow to drop murder charges against a black teen, Chrystul Kizer in Kenosha. And we highlight Giving Tuesday with the president and CEO of St. Anne's Group Home, Lorna Little.
Jury selection begins today for the officer who shot and killed Dante Wright. Obviously, this happening in Middle America. In Alabama, parole releases lagged specifically for black inmates. We'll tell you what's happening, and we're talking Black history as always.
Soulmates, we have that and so much more. You know why?
Good evening, Soulmates. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We want to start with a story that, we've told you about before, but the reason we're talking about this again is because it is a very important story, and, we want you to know. So we're going to talk about the story of Chrystul Kizer, a teenager in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Sounds familiar, right? This is a different story, though. But human rights advocates say maybe not so much. They are calling for charges to be dropped in her case. You're looking at a picture of her now. HuffPost reports Kaiser is a teenager who is charged with homicide for killing a man named Randall Volar. Kaiser says he drugged her and tried to rape her when she was just 17 years old. She and her lawyers also say that he was a repeated sexual abuser and that police knew about him and these allegations. So obviously, when we talk about Kenosha, Wisconsin, when we say teenager, those are kind of trigger words that go back to Kyle Rittenhouse, right? And so talking about Kyle Rittenhouse and what happened there, Kyle Rittenhouse, it was very clear the entire time that he shot and killed two men. He says he told the jury this was self-defense. The jury believed it, which is why he was acquitted, right? So Chrystul Kizer's case, it's interesting here because she has claimed self-defense from the very beginning of this. In this case, initially, she was barred from using self-defense, from using the self-defense argument. They actually had to go to an appellate court, and that decision was overturned. And so right now, because of what her lawyers say, the clear evidence in this case, human rights advocates, her lawyers, they just want this dropped. They want her to be able to go home. And also, she would still be sitting in jail right now awaiting trial had it not been for people in another state, a state over, right, in Chicago. Activists in Chicago actually raised her bail for her so that she could be released and await trial at home.
So happy that those activists in Chicago did that. But I feel like this is only because this is a little black girl. That's all I have to say because I don't want to reiterate you've, got all the details. But this is a little black girl fighting for her life. And it is so unjust and just really a sad story.
Yeah, it reminds me of the story of Centoya Brown. And we know her story, human trafficking. She was finally released from prison. But I want to talk about the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation released a study, and they found that 40% of sex trafficking victims were identified by black women. Another statistic is trafficking of black women would land them, well, let me go back. 40% of sex trafficking victims were identified as black women. 57.5% of all juvenile prostitution arrests are black children. And finally, traffickers admitted that they chose to take black women in captivity because they would get lesser charges than kidnapping a white person. So, one of my drum beats is systemic racism. And that last statistic about how sex traffickers victimize and choose black women and girls over white women for less time, that says it all. And for the Congressional Black Caucus to put out a study like this just identifies that this is something that our country needs to address when it comes to black missing women and girls. And to continue the conversation, today is Giving Tuesday. And since 2012, Giving Tuesday has become a day of heightening generosity when people give to their favorite charity. So today we wanted to introduce you to an organization that helps young women thrive and that also deal with young girls that have been victims of self-trafficking. So joining us now is the first African-American president for St. Anne's. Welcome, Soulmates, Lorna Little.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to finally have you on the show, Lorna.
Yes.
I want to start with St. Anne's. You guys help young girls, young black girls and girls of color with all types of things. But I want you to talk to us about some of the reasons why and how young girls of color get caught up in the human trafficking business.
Yes. So as you mentioned, St. Anne's Family Services has been around for many years, and I'm very proud to be able to lead it as an African-American woman, with majority of the young people in our program are Black and brown. We're here providing supports and housing. We started out as a program for young women who were pregnant, and then we've expanded to providing housing, counseling services. We have about 600 children in our early childhood education center throughout the area, and we're building 2 new sites in Linwood. What happens is, in terms of sex trafficking, human trafficking, the predators are seeking out individuals who are vulnerable. And what I find is that they know that some of the youth, especially those who have been in foster care, have faced some challenges. They have, familial issues. They have some separation issues. Many of them have experienced trauma. And so those individuals are targeting and grooming those young women in a way because they know that they have that little in, because they are looking for support and love, and they mask their predatory ways as love and guidance and support. And yes, it was done in the streets in many years in terms of people connecting and meeting people, but they've really moved, cyber now and doing things on the internet, Facebook, Instagram. And it's very important for people to understand who's tapping in and friend requesting children and families.
Ms. Little, it is such a pleasure to have you, a topic that we don't talk about nearly enough. So I wanted to know if you could tell us a couple of the other reasons why young girls are placed at St. Anne's.
Yes, so many times they are in foster care, situations that have happened prior to, them coming to us. Their parents may not be able to care for them. And so they've come into the foster care system in California. They're referred to us. Sometimes they're pregnant. That's our foundation. We have skill sets and supports for young parents. We also have people coming to us for counseling. They're homeless as well. They're a program that we have right now, a permanent supportive housing program called Beverly Terrace. So what we recognized was, initially I heard you call us a group home, and that's what it was many years ago. But we recognize that in order to have long-term sustained support and actually success is that we needed a continuum so that our young people had somewhere to live and get services in the foster care system. But then when they were ready to transition out, that they could go to our transitional housing. And then we built a permanent supportive housing. So we provide that spectrum of care and then the wraparound services and community-based services to make sure that once they leave us, that they can be successful, because they have to learn the skills here, but they're not going to be here forever. We want them to be successful when those people approach them in the community, because even the term prostitute, I know language has changed over the years for young people. People would blame the victim. And when they started saying sex trafficking, human trafficking, I think it was much better, because it is about control. It is about trying to take away someone's power. And they want to make those young women feel as if they don't have options or choices. And so I'm so glad that they have stopped blaming the victims who are groomed by these predators who seek out young people who are vulnerable.
And, I actually want to talk to you about that a little bit, because 19 states, California where we are is not one of them, but 19 states still criminalize children for prostitution. And what happens there, even though you may not be in a state where that is a legal thing to do, the narrative overall, and I pick up on this because you talked about, language, and I absolutely believe language matters. But what happens here is people have this belief in children who are in bad situations, because the fact of the matter is a child and an adult cannot have a sexual relationship, cannot have a consensual sexual relationship, right? And so when you have instances like that, and then the national narrative to a certain extent is this is a child prostitute, or instead of this is a victim, what can everyone do, right? Obviously, everyone may not even be able to donate, right? Everyone may not be able to volunteer their time, but what can everyone do? I think obviously one of those is watching your language. Language matters, but what can everyone do to kind of change the narrative, this idea that children, in an instance with an adult, when we're talking about sex trafficking or an adult paying for child sex abuse, can be anything other than a victim?
Yes, I think it's us changing our mindset. It's hard for people to wrap their mind around some of the things that young people face today. Let's be realistic. The fact that they're homeless at times, they're making choices because they want to have a place to stay. And that's why we're so thankful for our program. We take some of those pressures away so that they have a stable home, a stable meal each day, guidance and support. But a lot of times young people are couch surfing. And so the pressure to be seen in that way is depending on the system, the juvenile justice system, the way in which people see. And let's be honest, you talk about, the impact of Black and brown girls. Sometimes you will see the perception of, one girl that's 15 in one way and another girl from another culture seen very differently. And so there tends to be this vilification and assumption that this young woman is making that choice when, once again, someone is trying to control her, use her body, her mind, and make it a commodity. Because in California, sex trafficking is really the second to drug sales in terms of illegal activity. It has become something that is a moneymaker for gangs and in other ways. But we do have to change the language and understand this is not a choice that they've made in the way in which we think about adults making choices. And people make choices very differently in different situations and different circumstances. People need to remember that as well.
So Lorna, a lot of the girls that go to St. Anne's come from the juvenile justice system. And as you know, I've done some volunteering there. And I realized that one of the things that they have difficulties doing is having trust. It took a long time to build that trust, to get them to talk to me or to get them to just participate in things that, we wanted to do to uplift them. Can you talk about the process of what the intake is, how long them and their children and their families can stay in St. Anne's, and the programs that you provide, and when are they released back out into society?
So our hope is that, we talk about discharge planning starts at intake. And what I mean by that is we sit down and we have, goals. We want to say, to them, we want them to be invested in this. This is their life. This is their children's life. So we set goals with their social worker in the community, as well as with our case managers and social workers and clinicians here. Then we make that plan of action so that we can give them the skills and the guidance for their children, for themselves, to be the best that they can be, because they've been through a lot. Many of them have gone through being in other placements. Sometimes they've been in foster homes. And this is an opportunity for them to really stabilize. And so I know you asked me a series. I want to be able to answer all of the questions, but it really is about allowing them to be whole, because they have had so many dings and things happen to them. The trust factor, think about it this way, Neil. How hard is it for you to trust some stranger when it might not been able, you're not able to trust your parents or the caregiver who you had and held in highest esteem? That's very difficult. So now here's someone else comes along, says, I'm here for you. I want to care for you. And our staff are very loving and kind and want the best, and volunteers like yourself. It takes time to build that trust. And so they're just taking their time. They may not want to participate yet because they want to know that you're going to be there, that you're going to still be there and support them and guide them, and then that you're not going to turn your back on them. And so we go through Risking Connections. It's a training that we have for all our staff members. It's a long process. We are trauma informed. So we want to make sure that they understand that we're here to stay. We're here for them, and we're not going to take advantage or abuse or go through any of the things that they've gone through in life to turn it around. In terms of them staying here, When it's time for, we see that growth and that change and they've been here, it really depends. Each person's success is different, but we've had young people here for a year. We've had people here for 6 months. We've had some that have been here for 2 years.
Right.
And it's really transitioning through all parts of the program and making sure they have supports to be successful when they leave us. That's
Absolutely.
important.
That is so beautiful. We are so honored for you to grace our show today because, again, like I said, it's a topic that I feel doesn't get talked about enough. So thank you so much, and we are looking forward to having you back again.
Thank you. And it's a great day to be here on Giving Tuesday. Whatever you've done to support us, to keep up this great work on Giving Tuesday, we're thankful for your opportunity for us to be here.
Absolutely. Giving Tuesday, a great holiday to give back today. So lawyers and a judge began selecting the jury today that will decide the fate of former Brooklyn Center, Minnesota police officer Kim Potter. Now, as you know, Potter was a white police officer who shot and killed 20-year-old Dante Wright, who was black, during a traffic stop in April. She is charged with first and second degree manslaughter. As CBS Minnesota reports, the police chief at the time, they say Potter meant to use her taser but grabbed her gun. Both Potter and Chief Tim Gannon, they resigned after Wright's killing, and the Brooklyn Center City Council fired the city manager. She is charged with first and second degree manslaughter. And so someone on Twitter put something that was really powerful, and it pretty much was posing a question: is how many times does this have to happen in order for change to actually occur? And so I think that we saw with George Floyd, with Derek Chauvin, he had some accountability. We saw with Ahmaud Arbery's killers some accountability. It doesn't bring the person back, but really, what is going to make real change occur? Because I want a day where we don't have to even have this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference. You kind of max out at accountability, right? When somebody is dead.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the hope. You want to get to a point where people don't die, where this is not something that happens at such a high rate. And it is always sad. It is still sad because at best, if, a jury says this should not have happened, this was against the law, this officer broke the law, this officer goes to prison, you still have someone who is dead. And, I've been just thinking over the past few days about Ahmaud Arbery's mother and father, and how, once this is over, once everything over, the trial is over, for so many people outside of them, the fight is over. And the worst thing that's ever happened to them still exists. And again, also in this family, you remember he had a young baby, a little boy, and there's no win for someone who's lost their family member.
Well, on a brighter note, we know that this story right here represents millions, well, not millions, but hundreds and thousands of black people who never was able to get justice from being victimized from law enforcement. So once again, it is because of those protests that happened for George Floyd and for Ahmaud Arbery, where accountability has begun to happen and police officers are being brought up on charges. So I think this is a step in the right direction, and it stands as a testament to when you show up, you protest, and you advocate for the things that you want for your community, you do begin to see change happen. Because once again, this situation right here has happened to hundreds and thousands of black and brown people in this country, and they never got justice. So thank goodness that she is going to have her day in court, and hopefully this family will get some justice.
All right, let's move on to our next story here. So there's cause for concern, experts say, when it comes to prisons, state prisons in Alabama. So the rate of incarcerated people being granted freedom, according to the AP, by the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles, has dropped for the third straight year. The report also notes that paroles are lagging specifically for incarcerated people who are black compared to white. The 3-member board granted parole for 648 incarcerated people, turned down more than 3,500 others during the fiscal year that ended September 30th. The approval rate for the entire year was less than half the average of 37% for the previous 10 years. When it comes to people who are incarcerated, black people are being granted parole less than half as often as their white counterparts. Stats show this now. They have long showed this. The board here in Alabama has considered about 4,700 requests for pardons since November of 2019. Roughly an equal number of white and black applicants, still awarding pardons to 28% of white applicants and 18% of those who are black. This is a story that is not only happening in Alabama and is not only happening now, but this is a disparity that has been long held and nationwide, in prisons nationwide. And, you know, it doesn't only affect who's charged, who's arrested, who's charged, who's convicted, but also who's given probation, who's sentenced to harsher terms. Once there, who's given parole, who is deemed redeemable in society. Because in these cases, we're not just talking about equal numbers of people who have applied for parole. In many of these instances, we're talking about people who have committed similar crimes. Right. And the disparity is still there. And, you know, there is no real logical answer to why, other than obviously, we know, you know what I'm saying. I'm not saying that racism isn't a logical answer, but what I'm saying is that there is no statistical reason why this should happen.
Yeah. Well, critics are actually saying, Brooke, and it's a little bit in that story too, that the board, they're not following their own guidelines, and also they're not giving any information why they're denying these people parole, which is a problem in itself. But I also feel like there's this notion that black people deserve to be in jail. And so Amy Smith, she's an attorney who actually worked with the board for many years. She helps clients. She says, a quote here, she says, "It only took one bad apple to have really changed this in the direction of lock them up and throw away the key." And that really stood out to me as I was reading this story, because I mean, I'm happy that Alabama is doing this, but this deserves an investigation, and many more places, many more states need to look into this in their state as well, because this is a really big problem.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about Alabama. And there is it does make logical sense. Privatized prisons make money off of these inmates being incarcerated. That's the reason why privatized prisons are making money. And let's not forget Governor Kay Ivey of the state of Alabama. She's in the business with privatized prisons in this state. If you recall, soulmates, we talked about how she had allocated and she received all of this money from privatized prisons to build prisons, and then they stopped her. So she decided to use her COVID-19 relief package money to continue to build the prisons. So there's no like misunderstanding, or it's not illogical. This is all about this state of Alabama and this governor, Kay Ivey, in business with GO and Core Civic to make money. And guess what? If you don't parole them, then you continue to make money off of them. And so that is the issue that needs to be addressed, is why these privatized prisons are still able to make money off of black and brown people. And when we get rid of privatized prisons, then we will see the change. All right, here's another story. Heads of the country's historically black colleges and universities voiced their full support for President Biden's Build Back Better in a letter to the Senate today, according to The Hill. Now, the group wrote, for more than a century, Americans, HBCUs, have provided educational excellence and access for some of our vulnerable populations. Now, while constituting only 3% of all colleges and universities, we still graduate nearly 20% of all African American students. And to this point, a recent story from the United Negro College Fund, HBCUs are the primary post-secondary driver for moving black Americans from poverty to middle class. And, you know, this is what needs to happen. I'm not sure if Republican senators are going to listen to HBCUs, but guess what? HBCUs are in a lot of southern states. Now, if these students on these southern college campuses known as HBCUs decide to register to vote on these campuses, then that's where the power can be to push these senators, which is where the bill is now, to pass this bill. So I think it's great that they moved this letter, but I would like to see organizations like Black Voters Matter, Rock the Vote, begin to get on these campuses to register these students to vote, so then you could really exercise that civic power that you could have to really push these senators to change their mind and vote for this bill.
So the main subject is STEM programs. That's what they're trying to help boost, is the STEM programs. And so NBC News actually did a story on this, I believe a month ago, and it said that HBCUs were really eager for this, specifically why they did this, to compete with top tier research universities. So HBCUs, we're looked at as, well, not we, I'm making it seem like I went to HBCU, but HBCUs are looked at as second-tier research schools. So with the STEM programs getting a boost, this helps everything. And so I think this is awesome. And I'm happy that they're zeroing in on the STEM programs because it's really important.
You know, when we talk about HBCUs and the importance of HBCUs, here on this show, you know, we've touched on the large amount and the large percentage of black doctors, black lawyers who graduate from HBCUs. When we talked about what was happening at Meharry Medical College, right? One of what many people don't know, an HBCU school, a medical school in Nashville, Tennessee. We had a doctor on, a professor at Meharry, talking about the importance of black doctors and specifically why it was important to give $10,000 to use the federal funds in that way, why they wanted to pour back into those students, right? Because what they feel like, hey, listen, this is what they mean to society. So we break down constantly on this show different reasons, and we could talk over and over and over again. Today, I want to just touch a little bit more on that. And the United Negro College Fund actually points out how HBCUs really meet the needs of not only low income, but first generation college students. And that's really important. They say this, I just want to give you this quote. It says, HBCUs provide a stable and nurturing environment for those most at risk of not entering or completing college. That's important. I did an interview a while back with a black man. He's a Harvard professor. He's, you know, so amazingly intelligent and great, but he talked about going to Harvard. And he talked about being at Harvard and being a low income first generation college student and how, you know, he had a scholarship, he had the grades, but there were still so many pockets of his needs that weren't met. So for instance, a big one that people don't think about, he had to stay there for spring break. Christmas break, he had to stay on campus. The cafeteria shuts down. Luckily, he had a place to stay, but he didn't have the money to leave school and go home, and he didn't really have the money to eat throughout those times. And they're just, no matter what scholarship money he was given and what was taken care of for him academically, there were holes in his needs not being met. HBCUs, they know that, and they come in knowing that. And it's just one of the reasons why it's really important.
And plus this bill, it's not just STEM. The most important things that HBCUs are looking for in these bills are Pell Grants. The government, if the government provides more Pell Grants, it provides more access for the colleges as well as the students. And so in this bill, there is a certain amount of money allocated for Pell Grants, which would be a game changer for HBCUs and the students that they serve.
The city of Lima has sworn in its first female and first black mayor. Democrat Sharetta Smith took her oath in office on Monday at the city's Veterans Memorial Civic and Conventional Center. She defeated Republican Elizabeth Hardesty on November 2nd after the two topped a four-way primary in May. Smith succeeds retiring eight-term mayor David Berger, who's led the city since 1989. She most recently served as his chief of staff. An attorney, Smith previously served as an assistant public defender and criminal court magistrate. This was really great news, and everyone seemed really excited about it online.